if you want to know what they have to say.
All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 375, UN Women. Standards? We'll take double. And I know, you all see what I did there. But I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson, and hopefully we'll get a Lauren today. But if not, I think the two of us can handle it. We have the Doge in charge, Brian Martinez, working in the background. And we're still on UN Women tonight. I don't know if that counts as sexual harassment or not, but there we go. Before we get into that, though, we got to do what we got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And with that, I'll brief recap here. Last week, we looked at some of the rights that UN Women is attributing to women, that women should have these rights, and they're not being defended. Women's rights are not being defended, and so they want these white rights enshrined in the constitutions of all of the participating nations in the continent of Africa. They're doing this in Africa, and they are also doing this in South America, and we are still in Africa. So there you go. But I wanted to show you just a couple more things here, because this list they have, after they've gone through and enumerated these rights, then they've started talking about what these nation states have to do in order to protect these rights. So they don't just want them enshrined as you have the right to this and you have the right to that. There's some of it that looks like it is essentially addressing a system in Africa that is similar to coverture in the UK and the US back in the day. But this up here at the beginning where I had it sitting. So they want an African version of VAWA, basically, the Violence Against Women Act, or whatever it is in the UK that does exactly the same thing. And what they're wanting is to prohibit all forms of violence, but only specifically against women. They want a prohibition of rape, but again, only against women. They want prohibition, or they want legislature that is similar to the mandatory arrest policies in the U.S. That's what this one is. This one is legislative, administrative, social measures to ensure the prevention, punishment, and eradication of all forms of violence against women. And then they want here it says identify the causes and consequences of violence against women. That is to fund research like they do here in the U.S. And the way feminists do their research is very sneaky. So, for instance, when they wanted to research rape the prevalence of rape in the United States, what they did was they defined rape to exclude male victims of female perpetrated sexual violence. So if somebody forces either traditional reproductive sex or oral sex on the victim of a rape, the victim of a sexual assault, if they are forcing the victim to penetrate, then it counts as a rape. But if they're forcing the victim, forcibly penetrating the victim, then it counts as a rape. But if they're forcing the victim to penetrate, then it does not count as a rape. And the victim can then just sort of go fuck themselves, essentially, according to the research. They'll file it under other sexual assault, but they won't treat it as seriously as they treat rape. And in the UK, under the law, you cannot label a female perpetrator who forces reproductive sex on a male victim, regardless of his age. You can't label her as a rapist because the law doesn't support labeling her as a rapist. It only supports labeling her violation as a sexual assault, whereas rape can only be perpetrated using a penis. So unless the individual is biologically male and identifies as male, because they redefine penis to mean something else, if the person identifies as something else, then the victim is done out of being recognized as a rape victim.
Next time I come to the United States, I hope I can appeal to the United States government, given that 51% of the population in my country can just rape the shit out of me and get away with it. I mean, what counts as whatever does count as I've forgotten what even does count as what allows you to apply for asylum. I mean, usually it's something to do with how your government is marking you as able to be persecuted, and I'm like, well, half of the population of my country can just rape me with impunity. So next time I come to the United States, can you all just be like, yeah, that's fine, you can just come here? But they won't, because that means half of the population of the UK, and that's like 35 million people, can just go there and be like, yeah, if I stay in my country, I can be raped with impunity. You think that would be enough, but they'll just go, no, UK, you need to sort out your government first. It sounds like your government is a bunch of misandric terrorists. And yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that is kind of true. We are being ruled by a bunch of misandric terrorists. And yeah, it would be nice. It would be really nice if we could reform our government. And yeah, we're working on that. We really are. But in the meantime, can I please come to your country? Come to a place where I can at least get some kind of where if I happen to get raped, I can be like, can I get the government to help me in the event that I've been raped? But I get the weird suspicion that even the American government will be like, no.
Unfortunately,
we like to pretend that we will protect men who've been raped by women, but we don't either. I mean, You guys in the your government in the UK will officially not help you if you've been raped by women. And we like to pretend that our government will help a man who's been raped by a woman, but we don't either. I mean, let's face it.
In Ohio, they're quite open about it. Our Supreme Court here in the state of Ohio has determined that the wording of the Ohio law does not protect male victims, and if the prosecutor prosecutes for rape and not sexual assault, the case will be overturned. And that was in the case of, we did a show on it actually. That was in the case of a woman who had raped her own 2-year-old son, and she got her case got overturned after she was convicted because she did do what she was accused of, but because the attorney, the city attorney or state attorney, the prosecutor had prosecuted her for rape and not for sexual assault, her case was overturned and she was set free.
Much like this thing we call the Duluth model. It's long since been outdated that we call it the Duluth model, because it's long since been expanded to the entire USA, and indeed long since expanded to the rest of the Anglosphere, including the UK. Much like the outlawing of cannabis, it was outlawed in the USA, and then the UK, being a vassal state of the USA ever since the war, that law was just expanded to the UK, and now ironically, there's many states in the US where they've pulled it back, and now they're like, oh yeah, it's fine if you smoke cannabis, but it's now to this day in the UK, no, you can't smoke cannabis. And we're like, why? Because America told us to outlaw it. And we're like, well, many states in the US have since anti-outlawed it, and now it's fine there. So can we pull that back? No. The USA gave us an excuse to clamp down on you and your chemical freedoms. So bollocks to you. We don't care if the USA is finally giving their citizens freedom. We're going to follow on the USA's clampdowns against your freedom, but we're not going to follow on the pullback. Any of that.
So what actually happened is that it wasn't legalized; it was decriminalized, because we lock up everybody. We lock up our prisons are full of people, right? You guys don't lock up any.
Our prisons are full of men. Let's be clear on that, because 5% of inmates are women. Even though more than 5% of convicts are women, women are more likely to get alternative sentences than men.
Yeah, but over in the UK, you guys don't lock up anybody, not even your rapists. So there you go. You're free to rape a 12-year-old girl if you want to, but no smoking the devil's lettuce. That's right. That makes sense.
And no speaking out against the foreign rapists or anything. And it's so annoying how many British people like to blame America for everything, but they never blame America for the anti-cannabis laws, and they never blame America for any of the things that might that might help us blame foreigners for anything. And it's the problem with the British government is even though they hate Americans and they hate the American government in the event that they ever put America first, they will absorb any American law that clamps down on the British people, but they won't absorb any American law that heightens the rights of the British people.
That is the nature of government in general, actually.
but it's like I say, it's
like
even
whether it's
it's
elected
even
or monarchy or whatever, any
it,
law that allows them more control over you,
but
but they don't,
there's
they're less responsibility for your welfare, they'll adopt it.
there's so much more leeway in the USA. Like if you get a Trump, then that Trump will put America first, and much to the chagrin of the Democrats and the anti-America first people, you can at least push it forward and backwards. Like you'll get a Trump, and then you'll get a Biden, and then you'll get a Trump, and it will go forwards and backwards. But in Britain, it doesn't fucking matter. Like our government, like will adopt any anti-British policy, and then they'll push back on any pro-British policy, and then they'll
It's because
adopt any anti-British policy. And it's largely because we're European, and that's just because we're leading the way. As much as you think the oikophobic policies are leading the way in America, no, it always led the way in
Europe, yeah.
Europe. Yeah, and this is what I mean with the feminist policies and the anti-drug policies and any other policies. Like the UK government will clamp down on any policy that fucks over the British people, and any policy that heightens the rights of any non-British people. And yeah, this is me asking America, can you please lead the way in any policy that can influence British politicians to maybe stop, dare I say, oppressing the British people. Because the idea of putting Britain first is not a policy that is even in the periphery of any British political party. And yeah, I know our media likes to present the idea that reform is the British equivalent of a Trump, but no, we don't have anything like the British equivalent of Trump. And I just want to push it forward that one day we could have the British equivalent of Trump. No, it's not Nigel Farage. No, it's not reform. It's not even anything approaching that. And it's because our media won't allow it to happen. Because our media is dyed-in-the-wool leftist bullshit. And I would like it if we could have our Trump any day now. And it's not going to happen for another 10 years or so. And it's not even as though Trump is legalizing weed. Ironically, it's the Democrats who are legalizing weed. So yeah,
well, that's them cleaning up their own mess, because it was the Democrats that outlawed it in the first place. So
indeed,
yeah.
I don't even know where I went with this.
Well, this is a problem with government everywhere, and it's governments are like homeowners associations, right? If you have good people running it, then they do what they're supposed to do. They don't overregulate, and they do like keep the upkeep done that they're supposed to be upkeeping. But if you have people like Nancy Pelosi and her ilk that are just using the government as a means of making money through investment and insider trading, then you end up, with this mess that we've got Trump cleaning up now. And if you have people who are just controlling assholes with boards up their butts, you get the UK government. You get the Canadian government. You get most of the nations in Europe have the the type of government that is like that HOA board that wants to regulate everything from, what shade of brown or tan your house has to be painted to which make and model of car you're allowed to own and have parked in your garage, whether or not you can smoke in your own home and things like that in a non condo setting where the smoke isn't going into your neighbor's unit. And that's essentially what Europe has become, is a bunch of their governments are like a bunch of old Karens, old ladies just bitching about everything, because they don't really have they used to be, every nation in Europe was at war with each other. And so they had a my nation first attitude, because their nation would be eliminated if they didn't. And now they don't have that going on, and they're doing essentially what HOAs do when they don't have anything better to do, and they have an inflated sense of self-importance. And so that's basically my assessment of the world government. But in the meantime, we do have a couple of super chows. I will read these off. Meredith G gave us $5 and said, HBR Talk 375. Honey for the Badgers. Thanks for the thought-provoking discussion. And Great Indoors said, gave us $5 and said, this week I came across this blog spot, gave us a link, and it made me wonder if Hannah ever heard of TV newsman Chet Huntley and the New Year's resolutions he made to himself regarding journalistic integrity back in 1955, because he was getting worried about the state of his profession back in those days. Yeah, I have heard of that. It was something that was talked about in my newspaper class when I was in high school, actually. And we went over a bunch of different things, and how journalism changed over the years. We looked at things like, were Woodward and Bernstein really great investigative journalists, or did they just hate the administration at the time? And were they just salivating over a story that was a scandal for that administration? And I kind of, in the long term, I kind of developed a theory on that. I think that my teacher was onto something there, that they actually did just hate the administration. And I think that was a thing in journalism already in the 50s. So by the time that you had the 60s and the 70s and all that, all the scandals that came out after, it was journalists had bone to pick with whichever administration was in charge. There were either right wing or left wing journalists, not journalists that just wanted to tell you what was going on. And so every administration after Watergate had its set of scandals. Like, I don't think we've had a single one where journalists weren't looking for some way to scandalize the public. And Watergate was the thing that Woodward and Bernstein really screwed up. Was they focused on the part of the scandal that would get people's attention, and they didn't dig deep enough. And had they dug deep enough, they would have found a much bigger scandal that was really worth looking for. And so they missed that, because they got the public all titillated over what they did report. And that's one of the drawbacks of, I guess, yellow journalism, and in particular yellow journalism that targets people specifically.
Russiagate was far worse than Watergate. I don't know how much of our audience is even aware of what Russiagate really entailed, but most of you should be at least peripherally aware. Yeah, it was an attempted coup. Watergate, which is the gate that named all the other gates, that put the suffix "gate" over everything. And it was presented that Richard Nixon was paranoid about the possibility of anyone usurping his presidency through democratic means or whatnot. But then the possibility that Trump would usurp. I forget who the Democratic nominee after Obama was. Who the fuck was it? Who the fuck was it? Can anyone remember who
Oh,
Trump was? Oh, it was Hillary. Sorry, fuck.
yeah, who
Yeah,
Trump ran
sorry.
against after Obama? That was
Oh
Hillary.
yeah. It was Hillary, and yeah, it was between Obama's paranoia and Hillary's paranoia, and yeah, this whole Russia Gate scenario. That this whole fucking it wasn't just paranoia. It was this well, what do you even call it? This it was a conspiracy theory. I mean, if you're gonna call anything a conspiracy theory, it was this idea that if Trump gets elected, it's because of Russia and Putin. And it doesn't matter what Putin or Russia says. It doesn't matter what anyone says. No, look, we've employed some people. That is to say, we've paid some people to lie about Trump's campaign, and this was all leagues, and I mean nautical leagues worse than anything that Richard Nixon did. But people are just talking about anything else but that. And this was the thing that made all conspiracies called gates ever since then, because it was apparently so significant. But yeah, this fucking Russiagate thing was multiple times worse than any of that, and yet we're just leaving it aside. Meanwhile, Obama is still like turning up and giving interviews, going like, "Oh, it's so bad that Trump is calling in the military into Chicago and Washington D.C. He can't be doing that sort of thing. That's that's just simply unbearable, and it's an attack against democracy, motherfucker." You've fucking you fill the sentence in by yourself. Like, this guy was the worst attack on democracy in the entire history of American democracy. And it's the whole thing is fucked. Like, Obama should be in prison. Hillary should be in prison. Biden should be in prison. Fucking Bill Clinton should be in prison. All of these people should be in prison. And yet they're still out here, free as a bird, telling everyone that Trump should be in prison, even though they fucking tried their college best to put him in prison for the worst thing they could even find. And the worst thing they could even find is mortgage fraud, which they couldn't even figure out because he didn't really commit it, whereas Letitia James did, and that's another whole story. Fuck me, it's like we're dealing with a bunch of criminals trying to accuse their innocent opponents of being a bunch of criminals, and I don't even. There's so much, like I don't even know how to get through the spaghetti because there's so much spaghetti. It's a ball of spaghetti the size of the sun we're dealing with, that in the meantime is trying to accuse their opponents of one single strand of Singapore noodles. Singapore noodles are the really skinny, bright yellow ones that can't even. You know what I'm saying? It's fucking career criminals trying to rule the country while they try to accuse their opponents of being criminals, despite having committed the thinnest thread of a crime. And they can't even do that. They tried their best to convict Trump of a crime, and the best they could do was something that Letitia James is an order of magnitude more guilty of doing. And God forbid they ever try to convict Trump of doing what Obama did, or indeed what either of the Clintons did. I mean, it's just, how do we find ourselves in this timeline where career criminals who went into the presidency with 5 million in the bank and left the presidency with 250 million in the bank? I'm specifically talking about Bill Clinton there, but for fuck's sake, how I mean, by what metric do we measure opportunistic career criminals other than what Democrat presidents have done versus what, not even Republican presidents, but what Trump has done? Bill Clinton went into office with 15 million in the bank and he left office with 250 million in the bank. God only knows what would have happened if Hillary Clinton entered the office with 250 million in the bank. She would have left with $1 billion in the bank. And, you know, fuck knows what it was with Obama. But it's the same with almost every president in living memory. Trump is the only president that went into office with billions in the bank and then left with, I mean, close to $1 billion left. Yeah, it's shorter in the bank, largely because of having not accepted a wage. Like, this is largely the problem with not just American democracy, but with democracy in general. That what you really want is for someone to go into ruling the country with a certain amount in the bank, and then leaving with less in the bank because they pay more than they take out of the system. Because if you have a system that incentivizes people to make money as a result of being in office, then you're only incentivizing people to it's this analogy that Dankula used once. It's this it's like being on a game show where you go into this perspex tank where a bunch of banknotes get thrown around you in this wind chamber, and you have to grab as many banknotes as you can in the 4 minutes you have, and that's democracy in a nutshell. Any politician that gets elected, it gets given 4 years to grab as much money as they can, and walk away with it, and that's why it never works, and that's why I know this is going to piss off a lot of Americans. This is why monarchy is better than democracy. Because monarchs aren't interested in going into a perspex chamber where they can grab as much money as they can, because they already have money. Your leaders.
Well, that's not entirely true either, because monarchy sort of has to stem from someplace. It's kind of like saying shit with corn in it is better than shit with nuts in it. It's still shit.
Indeed, but it helps if your leader is already rich and they cannot be corrupted by the prospect of becoming more rich. This is what gave you the Clintons. This is what gave you the Obamas.
The only way for humans to have a system of government and have it not end up like this is exactly the same thing that has to be done with HOAs, and that is, it can't be a one-way street. It can't be that the people sit back and are governed and don't participate in the process, where their participation would include vigilance toward the government holding the government, the individuals involved in the government, accountable, and being prepared to step up and take over as needed if the government officials are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. In HOA systems, where usually you have, if you have a homeowners association, the people that are involved in it usually live in the neighborhood. Once in a while, you have a homeowners association that is none of them live in the neighborhood. They own property there, but they're not residents. And they're awful usually. But if you have an association where the people are residents of the neighborhood, the people that are part of the association, then the other people in the neighborhood see who is making the rules and who is enforcing the rules and how they're behaving and everything. And it is vital for these neighborhoods that if somebody is in that position, they're on the board or they're president of the board or whatever, that if somebody is being an absolute shit, that you just you run against them and you campaign based on what an absolute shit they've been and how you're going to do a better job than they're doing. And usually your neighbors will be so fed up with this absolute shit who has been enforcing rules that don't exist, or enforcing rules in strange ways and things like that, that the rule doesn't say what they're saying or whatever, that the people are fed up with. They'll vote that person out of office, and in comes somebody who will actually do the job. But if you have people that expect to sit back and not participate and not be vigilant, not keep track of what their officials that they're voting for are doing, and not hold them accountable, not actually, be prepared to run for office if they have to, or to support a neighbor who's running for office against somebody who's doing a bad job, not have any inclination toward seeing people prosecuted if they break the law and so on in office. You get, what we've had in the United States, what Canada has had, what the UK has had, what every nation has when they get a corrupt government, and people just sit back and let things happen until it starts to affect them enough to get upset about it. And by the time they bellow about it, it's too late. They've expected this one-way street to lead only good things to their doorstep for so long, and now it's too late for them to change the way that it works. At least not without pain, which is what we're doing now. We're dealing with the pain of changing the way things work. But back to the journalistic element of that. What we've got in every nation pretty much is, it's not just our governing bodies that are the problem at this point. Part of citizen vigilance and part of citizen involvement in the process is the journalistic aspect. What the Super Chow brought up, Chet Huntley, and his New Year's resolutions to himself. The reason it's vital and important that journalism actually be journalism and not just, say, a mouthpiece for a set of beliefs, or a way to clickbait everybody for money and things like that. That it actually covers things that are of interest to people, that gives them information that they can use to make decisions. Is because not everybody can see what's going on firsthand in DC. Not everybody can see what's going on firsthand if you're in Ohio and California is doing something shady. And because we are in a large nation and not everybody can attend every government activity. You've got your city council meetings, you've got your county commission meetings, you've got your civil service meetings, you've got your state legislature meetings, and so on. You've got school board meetings at the city and state level. Like all of that is stuff that we've let it get so big and so blobby, like the Blob from the movie The Blob, that we can't keep track of it by ourselves anymore. And without actual journalism, where somebody is reporting on who, what, where, when, and how, what did they do, who did it, and how did they do it, when did it happen, where did they meet, who's affected, what's the outcome of this, what's the upshot, so what they're doing. If you don't have that, then you don't have the ability for the entire nation to participate in a national government, or the entire state to participate in a state government. And where Woodward and Bernstein come in regard to that, I don't know how many people realize this, but the Watergate burglary, everybody always is told the Watergate burglary was about getting materials, getting dirt on the Democrats, or finding out what they're going to do so the Republicans can decide what they're going to do, and so on. It wasn't that simple. Before Nixon was president, when he was still running, he interfered in peace talks around Vietnam. He interfered in the peace talks with North Vietnam during Lyndon B. Johnson's presidency, so that it would look like only he could end the war. And what he was looking for was what the burglars were looking for. There was a letter that had some evidence of that interference, and that's what he was looking for in the burglary, to see if Johnson had that letter, or if the Democrat Party had that letter, and tried to get rid of it so that it couldn't be used against him. So it wasn't just campaign materials. It was, this scandal could destroy his chances of being elected. And that, and if I remember right, from like, there were several articles that I read about this, but if I remember right, what he was afraid of was actual prosecution, because he did that before his election. And so of course that would be in violation. I can't think of the stupid act. They accused Trump of violating this act, where once the election was over and he was president, and Obama's administration was on the way out, his administration started making contact. Here's how you're going to get a hold of us. Here's what we're going to want to work on once we get into office. But with Nixon, this was prior to all of that. It was prior to being elected, prior to having the authority to do that. So it actually was a violation, whereas Trump's administration did not actually violate that law, the law that prevents them from interfering essentially in the dealings of the previous administration. So definitely, the Logan Act, that's what it was. Thanks, Meredith G. So essentially, Woodward and Bernstein got the big story, but they missed the bigger story. And it was because they were all excited that they got the big story. And if they had gotten the bigger story, things might have been significantly different. Nixon probably would have been prosecuted. By the time the bigger story came out, it would have been it's not that it was a moot point. It's that it was no longer no longer enough of an issue to care about. But they still could have prosecuted him. But in any case, all that aside, once again, we are looking at an organization that's trying to create an even bigger governing body that's harder to keep track of and pulling the same shit. And as I said, this idea of creating a funding for research that is manufactured, essentially, like we were talking about at the beginning, how feminists use things like defining rape to exclude male victims, so that when they get statistics on rape and they see that, in the past 12 months, just about the same number of men and women have reported being raped, and they don't have to admit that more than a few rapists are women. They like to say that 95 to 99% of rapists are men, but if you exclude if you just define rape to exclude female perpetration, then of course most rapists are going to be men. When you acknowledge female perpetration, it is much closer to about 50-50 in terms of perpetration. And of course, the other aspect of that is you're looking at what percentage of a population, a demographic that is like less than 0.1% of the general population are each sex. And feminists will make claims about what men are like based on, 99% of this tiny percentage of the population are men, and they'll ignore the fact that 99.9% of the male population doesn't fall into the category of violent criminal. So, in any case,
Yeah, for as bad as monarchy is, and for as bad as republicanism is, and we could argue about that, none of it's as bad as what the fuck UN Women is doing.
yeah, UN Women isn't even nobody voted for them, right? They just sort of got together and made themselves relevant to the United Nations. They're not even really a UN organization, but the UN listens to them. So be like if we got together and decided to call ourselves UN Badgers, and then the UN had to listen to us for some reason. But they're going through, and in addition, so what I'm establishing here is that this is them trying to enact throughout all of Africa, every country that they have a connection to. They want to establish in those nations legislation modeled after the Violence Against Women Act. So the Violence Against Women Act has those mandatory arrest policies, mandatory prosecution, mandatory sentencing. That's in the one thing I read. They have the funding for research to establish essentially that the patriarchy theory of domestic violence, which everybody calls the Duluth model, is fact, even though it's not, and that all elements of the law will examine and act through that filter. And they want to create a curriculum in the local school systems and the education systems that exist in these countries that will promote that idea. And that's here. They're actually wanting to eradicate elements in traditional and cultural beliefs in these nations that they can consider to be stereotypes that legitimize or exacerbate tolerance of violence against women. So, for instance, if men are allowed to hit back right now in any nation of Africa, if the response to a woman hitting her partner is that he can defend himself. They want that changed. But they don't want to change, like, if men are obligated to finance the lifestyle choices of the women in their lives. They don't want that changed. And they want perpetrator programs like the ones in the United States, the UK, Canada. They want to extend this to trafficking of women. My understanding is that most Africans who are trafficked as kidnapped victims of human trafficking are male, not female. Although I guess Africa does have a sex trafficking problem, and that's both sexes, but I think most of the labor trafficking is male. But they want to address trafficking of women. They want to prohibit all medical and scientific experiments on women without their informed consent. So I look at that one, and you go back to the sub-Saharan African studies on circumcision. Those men were given a sales pitch. They didn't get the other side of the story. They were told what to do, and then they were paid to participate in the study. They didn't have the people who did the study would probably call it informed consent, but I don't think that that's very informed. They want to ensure that this is funded. So adequate budgetary and other resources. So there's funding for this. And notice all of this is specific to women. They don't have in this, we want to end intimate partner and family violence, because intimate partner and family violence happens to both sexes. It doesn't just happen to the intimate partner. Family violence can include elder abuse, child abuse, abuse between siblings living in the same home, abuse between other members of extended family living in the same home. And if they start in on that, then you discover that a lot of women abuse elderly in-laws. A lot of women abuse their children. And a lot of abuse is perpetrated by female family members. Right? And finally, they mention men. Ensure that women and men enjoy equal rights in terms of access to refugee status and determination procedures, and that women refugees are accorded the full protection and benefits, but not men, guaranteed under international refugee law, including their own identity and other documents. So they mentioned men like once, briefly, but all of this rolled together is essentially they want VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, copy-pasted into every nation in Africa. What VAWA has done in the United States is significantly increase the rate of divorce here, and it has significantly increased the rate of the use of vexatious litigation as a tool in divorce, as a weapon in divorce. So you get your wife files for divorce, you have kids, you have you own a home, and maybe you have money in the bank, and she wants the property, and she wants custody of the kids, and she wants child support from you, and she wants some of that money in the bank. She accuses you of abuse, so that she can use the provisions in the Violence Against Women Act and whatever state law exists in your state on top of that to ensure that she is protected from her alleged abuser, kicks you out of the house, and then you are stuck fighting a court battle that could go on for years if you want to try to get any of that back and not have to make payments to her for the next several years to decades depending on what laws are being enforced. And, if she chooses to never marry again, you could be paying, you'd be paying for the rest of your life in that situation. So a lot of men do try to fight it, but a lot of them end up in a situation where they cannot finance that fight, or where the law doesn't allow them to defend themselves effectively, and they lose everything. And it's not just half in that instance. She becomes the homeowner, but if there's a mortgage, he still has to pay it. She gets custody of the children, but he still has to support them. And she doesn't necessarily have to let him see them. And if she's really rabid about this fight, she may end up putting a criminal record on him for things that he didn't do.
And this,
Yeah.
by the way, is why so many of these quote unquote refugees, and I draw the biggest hand quote unquote refugees, is the reason that so many of them are quote unquote fighting age men. Because it's long since been decided that any women from these third world countries are allowed to come to these first world countries, because it stands to reason that women must be victims. So if any woman wants to come from these African or Middle Eastern countries, they should be allowed to come here. But in general, they don't want to, because women are not being persecuted in these third world African or Middle Eastern countries. It's very much the men who face assassination by one group or another. It's very much the men who are being persecuted by these countries and their governments, and that's why it largely because in Muslim countries, men of a certain financial advantage can have four wives, right, or more. They can have as many wives as they want, and that necessarily leaves a great deal of men who have no option because they can't find wives, because so many men can have four wives each, and that leaves 75% of the men who can't find any wives whatsoever, and they are being persecuted by the government. So they come over here, largely because, as is just illustrated by what is just outlined by the UN Women shit, that that men should be offered the same refugee status as women, even though women should have never been offered it in the first place. But if men are given this status, then 75% of the men of this country should be given the same opportunities. And so they go, well, hell yes, you're saying I can go to Britain and be given free shit forever. Well, hell yes, I'm going to, and that's how we got ourselves in this situation. Meanwhile, the people in Britain and across the rest of Europe are going, well, look, these foreigners are all men, and so we should hate them because they're all men. And I'm like, bro, you're completely missing the fucking point.
Yep. Meanwhile, the guy.
It's misandry that sent these people to our country, and now you are greeting them with misandry.
With misandry.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the guy with the four wives is learning why King Solomon, who had 500 wives, famously, wrote over and over again in the book of Proverbs about how awful it is to live under the same roof as a quarrelsome woman. Because, once you get... This is... I never really realized how bad that would be until there's a movie I watched on a flight. I want to say clear back in like 1994, about four wives in a home in China, and in that particular way of marriage, the first wife has authority over the underling wives, and then like each wife after the first one has authority over the next wives after her, and so on. So there's a built-in pecking order, and as a result, these women are simultaneously like on their face, they're nice to each other, like they're a team of wives that are taking care of this husband, right? But under the surface, they're just absolutely evil to each other, just horrible. And there's a whole set of like they learn to respect each other, but at the same time, they learn to respect each other in the way that attack dogs learn to respect each other. And I cannot for the life of me remember the name of the movie, but it was, I mean, we're talking a long time ago there, right? 1994 is a while ago. But it really struck me that if I was a man, I would not want to be married to more than one woman if women were going to behave like that. If they can't engage in teamwork and family love, then they don't need to be under the same roof. Really, so if a guy maybe kept 4 wives in 4 different homes in 4 different locations where they didn't have to interact with each other, maybe that might not be so bad. But I don't know. I can't imagine what it must have been actually like for King Solomon.
What's the name? The OnlyFans or Bonnie Blue was found to say, my situation is the final product of feminism, and a lot of the traditionalists
She's the one
ostensibly
that
on our
had sex with like 1,000 guys or something.
yeah, something like that.
Oh,
And a lot of the people on our side are saying, yeah, no,
so
she's
unhygienic.
right. She's right. These OnlyFans whores are the final product of feminism, and I'm like, no, bro, Islam is the final product of feminism. And I realize it's going to have a lot of people going, what? What are you talking about? No, this is some grade 8 shit. But yeah, no, this is where it goes, because feminism and Islam are both extreme measures of how we protect women. Eventually, it comes down to the rich and powerful men should control as many of the women as possible so that they can protect them. I mean, why do you think they dress them in fucking black bags? It's so they can protect them. And yes, I know that this seems like an extreme measure that inflicts on their human rights, but they're doing it to protect them. It's different measures between the West and the East of ways of protecting women. And yeah, to us it seems like Muslims are going too far to protect them, so much that they're oppressing them. But the Muslims are looking at us and how we allow women to dress themselves as whores, and they're like, no, you're going so far to protect them that you oppress them. And on both cases they have a point. Like, you're going so mental in trying to protect women that you're actually leaving them open to destruction. And yes, that is the case. You can be so preoccupied with protecting women that you actually, dare I say, oppress them. And I don't like using that word because it's so often hideously misused, and I don't necessarily think it's applicable in either case. Because when two nations are at war, they tend to oppress each other, but the oppression it never manifests as protecting them too much. And What you can say about Islam is they protect their women too much, and what they say about us is we protect our women too much. And yeah, that's in both cases. There's a point going on. You can protect women so much that it looks like you're oppressing them, but it's not oppression. Oppression is what happens when two nations are at war. You know what I mean? They fucking put them in camps and they fucking gas them and kill them. That's oppression. What men do to women is not oppression. Not in Islam, not in the West. What we do to women is protect them too much. I know it looks like oppression, but it's not. It's protecting them too much. It's a very different thing. It's not oppression. It's it's the opposite. You know what I mean?
Sort of like calling Munchausens by proxy being overprotective in a way. I at the top, if you go to my x.com page for my account, you'll see that most people, usually have some sort of picture up there. I just have a black screen with the white text on it that says "Stop paying women to make stupid choices." And that's the protection that women have today in the West, is that men take all the consequences when women make stupid choices. So, or their children take the consequences. So, a woman decides that she's going to ignore the fact that criminals exist, and she doesn't do what men have to do to protect themselves from being the subject of criminal violence. And somebody comes running up behind her and slams into her and steals her purse and goes running off with it. Suddenly we're looking at violence against women, and even though this is just somebody that was trying to get some money, and they didn't target her because she was female, they targeted her because her money was in a container that was easy for them to steal. And so, now we have to hear about how violent men are, even though the percentage of the population who engages in that type of crime is actually incredibly tiny. And we have to hear about the bear. We have to hear the bear narrative is about claiming that women have just absolutely no way to tell the difference between men who are criminally violent and normal men who don't engage in any kind of violence whatsoever through their whole adult life, unless they're confronted with violence that they can't get away from and have to defend themselves from. And, they'll demonize every man in the area, and the next thing you know, their community passes a misogyny law, an anti-misogyny law, or there's a new curfew and everybody has to be inside earlier unless they have, some sort of thing saying that they're on their way to work or on their way home from work. Suddenly you have restrictions on men that don't really make the woman safe, but they appeal to her ego, and they make her feel better. And that's happened over and over again during the last century as a result of women doing stupid things. You have women creating an epidemic of unwed parenthood, which we all know about the statistics that show that children raised without an involved father have much worse outcomes statistically than children who are raised with an involved father. And yet over 40% of children born in the United States right now are born to single moms. And many of them are single moms by choice, meaning they had no intention of having an involved father when they got pregnant. Like, they got pregnant on purpose and had no intention of the father being involved, but they might want his wallet to be involved. Those that don't care if his wallet's involved or not get artificial insemination through sperm donors and sperm clinics, and that's been on the rise. Women going to these clinics and getting sperm donation when they don't have a partner to raise the child with, and So there's no involved father, not even involved stepfather. And women, when they're in that situation and they don't make enough money to support the child, they end up going on welfare, and you support the child through your tax dollars, every single one of you. Every tax dollar you pay, some of that money gets taken out for the welfare system, and that's where it goes. Right? So women are more likely to give up and declare themselves disabled if they have a physical disability or a mental disability that makes it difficult for them to find a job that they can do. They're more likely to, just say, "All right, well, I can't work now," and go for disability. And so you are also paying for that, right? And you're paying for a whole system to protect women against intimate partner and sexual violence that, as we have seen in our last few shows, has spent the last 30 years in an international covenant with actions being taken in every nation in the world as part of this covenant, and they have achieved absolutely nothing, according to their own reports. And you're paying for that through your tax dollars. So women, women are not just overprotected. Women are surrounded in bubble wrap, paid for by men, that is unfortunately designed to prevent women from learning from the consequences of their choices by mitigating those consequences to the degree that women can't even consider them as consequences. I have created a family. Now I cannot afford to get my hair and nails done all the time and live life like a party girl. Oh no, yes you can, because we're going to pay for your groceries, we're going to pay for your house, we're going to pay for your electricity, your heating bill, your water bill, your sewer and trash. We're just going to make men pay those through taxation, right? They're not oppressed. Mangaka 92 has a great way of putting it. They're not oppressed, they're sheltered.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And this is women looking through the bubble at Africa, where feminists don't have as much control, and deciding that women in Africa must be horribly oppressed by their own culture, and now they got to start interfering in African marriages. So that's again, that's where we are right now. This is what they're trying to do. Another one that really struck me, and we're gonna skip the first one here because it's similar to previous ones. Prohibition through legislative measures backed by sanctions of all forms of female genital mutilation, scarification, medicalization, and paramedicalization of female genital mutilation and all other practices in order to eradicate them.
Do they at any point mention male genital?
Nope,
No,
not at
'cause
all.
that's not what they call it. They call it something else, so it is something else. Just
Mhm.
like they call men and women something else, should they decide to call themselves something else. This is what it all. This is why I go on about fucking linguistics so much. This is why Orwell went on about linguistics so much, because it all it all stems from what we call things. This is why Confucius warned us that the beginning of wisdom is calling things what they are. We're calling female genital mutilation what it is, genital mutilation. Meanwhile, we're not calling male genital mutilation what it is. We're calling it this all manner of euphemisms, and I've made it my life's work to fucking fight back against euphemisms, because I fancy myself as an amateur linguist. I'm something of a linguist myself, to do the Spider-Man meme, the Willem Dafoe meme. Yes, I'm something of a linguist myself, and yeah, if we were to really call things, then it would throw all of our societies into this chaos. Because I know a lot of you are going to accuse me of anti-Semitism. And if you got past that barrier, you would accuse me of Islamophobia, because it's not just Jews who mutilate the genitals of young boys. It's something like 70% of Americans. It's something like 90% of North Africans. And if you were to map this across the world, it disappears to vanishing point across East Asia. God bless East Asia, not for a number of things, but for this. A great deal of people, particularly monotheists, not just Jews, but especially Muslims, and indeed the 70% of Americans who do this to their sons, most of whom are Christians or atheists. So it's nothing to do with religious affiliation. This is something I wish I could die so I could meet Christopher Hitchens in the heavens. I mean, it's unlikely I would meet him in the heavens, because if Christopher Hitchens exists anywhere, it's probably not in the heavens, because he was like, yeah, I am not all this side of the heavens. But I want, I just want to talk to him about this idea he had that the genital mutilation community is almost entirely religious. It's not at all. The general American population is a testament to this. There are more circumcised males in North America than there are genitally mutilated boys in North America, and it's nothing to do with religion. There's nothing.
The practice is being abandoned, but
slowly,
it's still common.
There's nothing in the Christian mythos that tells people to circumcise their children, and yet there are more circumcised males than uncircumcised males in America, and this can't be accounted to by the Jewish faith or the Muslim faith. It's like Mr. Hitchens used to say, the genital mutilation community is almost entirely religious. No, the American population, it's, as I say, a testament against this. So we have to look to other explanations. And it's not just America. Even in my own country, 20% of males are, I want to say, circumcised, but let's not euphemize this. 20% of males are genitally mutilated, and it goes across the European continent and amongst these things, and it's nothing to do with religious justifications. It's because women like it. Let's get down to brass tacks. It's because a lot of women, an uncomfortable amount of women, prefer circumcised penises for whatever reason. I don't know why. I guess it's because it's more comfortable for them. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they're used to it.
Women are bandwagon jumpers, like that.
Yes,
and it's that women don't like it because there's anything good about it. Women like it because they're told that they should like it.
Yeah,
and it's gross if it's not done. and that's enough for a lot of women to decide that they
But
have to like it.
the
But the
very
truth
idea.
is that the circumcision pattern in the United States was driven by a market for foreskins, and that's been a thing for a very long time. It was initially driven by this philosophy that masturbation makes men weak, and cutting off the foreskin would discourage masturbation, and therefore
Yeah.
you have to do that. That was Harvey Kellogg.
And
But as soon
well,
as they
it's
started being
Maimonides.
able to,
Let us not forget Maimonides
right,
for
but
any Jews listening to me.
as soon as it started becoming feasible to use neonatal foreskin fibroblasts for medical purposes and in makeup and stuff, it got pushed really hard, and all of a sudden research was done in sub-Saharan Africa to try to prove that circumcision is very important and that you'll get AIDS if you don't get circumcised, which is all bullshit, and so on. When in reality, if you really want to avoid sexually transmitted infections, don't sleep around. And if you're gonna sleep around anyway, note that you're taking the risk and use condoms to mitigate it somewhat. But aside from that, like there's no basis. A lot of people think that it's because of Christianity. A lot of people think that Christianity has this mandate to circumcision because of the Old Testament mandate for Jews to be circumcised. But in fact, there are actual verses in the Bible that state that circumcision isn't important anymore. That it doesn't have to be done. And if I remember right, one of them is in Galatians, and basically says it doesn't matter whether you're circumcised or not. It matters that you exhibit your faith by working through love. And there was one in Corinthians, again, that said keeping God's commandments matters, not whether or not you're circumcised. And the commandments being the 10 Commandments. So it's not, it was decided by the early church that these verses indicated that circumcision is not important to Christians and there's no mandate to be circumcised. And so in other countries that are primarily Christian, you will find that there's not a high pattern of circumcision because of that. Only in the United States, and it's because in the United States it really was heavily promoted to the public, and women just bought into it.
Women just didn't just buy into it. They bought into it because they prefer being fucked by an uncircumcised penis. And we really have to push this onto them. Like, this is your son. Like,
Yeah.
do you want to be fucked by your son? Is that why you're doing that? I know that's going through a few barriers to get there, but you're not the one who's going to fuck your son. Your son's going to be fucked by someone else. So you're removing a part of your son's anatomy in the hope that whoever eventually develops a sexual relationship with them is going to prefer a genitally mutilated penis. Like, we really need to push back on that. Like,
yeah, I don't think it has as much to do with that as you think. I think women have a tendency to listen to people that they shouldn't listen to in general. And if somebody has a title that makes them seem authoritative, women will listen to that, and they'll just take it for granted that this person knows more than they do, and they'll accept it. But the other element of that is that a lot of circumcision in the United States was pushed by fathers. I want my son to look like me.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, that's my favorite argument. I want my son to look like his father. Well, doesn't his face suffice? Are they walking around with their dicks out saying, "Oh, look, we look just alike. I can see the resemblance."
Yeah.
No.
Well, I mean, you think of it this way, all right? If you were caught in a house fire and you have burn scars, are you going to do a scarification ritual on your son to
No.
make matching burn scars? If you were raised by an abuser that beat you with a belt and you have scars on your back from that, are you going to beat your child with a belt to create similar scars? This is a ritual that creates a scar, and it involves an amputation of skin. It's not it's not the same as dressing alike, and so it's definitely not the same. To say I want my son to look like me. I'm gonna have this done. It's not the same to suggest that that's normal as it would be to suggest that what nutritional things your ancestors did are right, or what clothing choices you wear together are right, or things like that. I want him to go into my profession because my profession made good money for me. This is a totally different thing. This is more like I said, wanting to scar your child for to match your scars so that the child looks like he went through the same pain and suffering that you did. And I will admit, you know, when I was pregnant, and there was a lot of pressure from different elements of my family, and there was a lot of pressure to just conform to what people were doing and what the medical profession was saying was necessary and all that. And I'm the kind of person that the first thought in my head was, I took anatomy. I took a few different courses that would be precursors to going into nursing. And one of the things that I learned was that the biggest organ in your immune system is your skin. It's your first line of defense against outside infections that if they just were to land on, say, open muscle tissue or something, would affect you. They would be able to get into your bloodstream. They would be able to create all kinds of problems. So you need, every time you get a cut, every time you get a scrape, every time you get a burn, anytime you have surgery, anything like that, it's creating an opportunity for opportunistic infections. And so the first thing I thought was they're advising me to have skin removed from my son's genitalia at a time period where he hasn't learned yet to control his bowels and his bladder, so he's incontinent, because all infants, all newborns are incontinent. Therefore, that area is going to be exposed to urine and feces, which are germ-laden, because that's your body's waste disposal. It seems like the dumbest thing in the world. I'm looking into this before I make this decision. What the hell? Why are we doing this to children? It'd be different if you were older, you were an adult, you've developed control over all of that stuff. You know that you can keep it clean, you can keep it bandaged. You're still going to expose it to urine. There's no way to not, but you could at least keep it clean easily, right? And avoid infection. Not as an infant, but as an infant, you're in a situation where you're completely helpless. You have no control over it, and you're reliant on parents to change you as soon as you go to the bathroom. So then, as soon as I started looking into more and more information on the subject, it just did not make sense to me. And I started talking to my husband about it, and he's like, "If you don't want to do it, we shouldn't do it." And that's the way we decided to leave it up to when he got older, what his decision would be, and that was it, you know. But I would say a year later after he was born, maybe 2 years, the first reports about those sub-Saharan studies started coming out. And I spent about 6 months going back and forth, self-doubt, should we have done this? Did I just, make my son more susceptible to HIV? And then I started looking at the studies themselves and realizing that the study was bullshit. They were essentially attributing to circumcision the benefits of condom use. Like entirely, the whole study was based on attributing to circumcision the benefits of condom use. And as soon as I realized that, I was like, all right, nope, correct decision. This isn't my body. It's not beneficial to do this in infancy. It's actually dangerous to do it in infancy. And I'm glad I realized that, because as I started looking more and more, I kept up on this information for a long time because of that period of self-doubt. And I realized how many boys die every year is as a result of this procedure, where they bleed to death because it wasn't known that they had a blood clotting issue, or they get an infection and they die from the infection. If it's done, there's a particular procedure that is done within just the Jewish community that involves, this is, it's really gross. The rabbi stops the bleeding with his lips. I'm not exactly sure where that came from or why,
That is
but there have
Jews.
been
That is Jews.
infants. I don't. It doesn't make sense. But the infants that are subjected to this, some of them get like that herpes that causes lip sores in their bloodstream. Well, during infancy, germs have an easier time crossing the blood-brain barrier than they do any other time. And as a result, they end up dying because of that. They get that infection and they die. And I cannot imagine what that must be like.
This is what
So yeah,
this is what took so many of us from the anti-religious community of, like, not just 10 years ago but 15 years ago, when we were all where we had this atheist community and we were all speaking out against religions and stuff. But then it finally occurred to us that what causes circumcision is, male genital mutilation is not just religion. It's misandry. There's no other way to put it, because it spans across all religions and even across non-religions. Even atheists can find secular ways to excuse the genital mutilation of boys. And we were all like, well, this goes far deeper than religion. There is something else that is causing this barbarism. It's not just Jews, it's not just Muslims, and it's certainly not just Christians, even though you think it would be. No, the reason so many people think it's perfectly fine to genitally torture young boys is misandry. And this is why we've been talking about this shit for a dozen years or so, because there's something that runs deeper than any religion. We call it misandry. We call it a bunch of things. A bunch of things that are not in the general parlance of the average person, because misandry is not in the general parlance of the average person. This is why it feels perfectly normal to genitally torture 8-day-old baby boys.
yeah.
It's called misandry.
If
There's a bunch of things that could be called, but we don't call it what it is, and what it is misandry. There's just this many people that just don't give a shit if we genitally torture boys, because they're just boys, because they're just males, and that's what it is. That's why so many people from the old atheist community of 15 years ago. I don't know how many of you remember that craze, where it required us to push back against religious covenants, because that was all we could do to push back against the genital torture of boys. But that was what it took, and since that's what caused the schism between misandrist atheists and non-misandrist atheists, and ever since then we've pushed back against ourselves in order to even try and isolate the notion of misandry, the notion that it doesn't matter what religion you are, it's not okay to genitally torture boys, and this is a far greater, a far more urgent issue than anything religious. Like it doesn't fucking matter what religion you are. It's not okay to genitally torture babies. Like it doesn't matter what's in the back of your head. Like it's not okay.
Yeah.
To do that to baby boys. And
It's the it's the building side of every coin, that the other face of the coin that has the actual face on it is gynocentrism. You can't have gynocentrism without misandry. This is why I don't believe gynocentrism is natural. I believe storge is natural. The family love that values the entire family and places a value on each person's role in the family, and organizes how the family is handled, how, who does what job, and how various parts of the family are exposed to government or protected from government, exposed to the community or protected from the community, who handles the social end, who handles the economic end, who handles the hunting, and who handles the gathering and all that. But it's all revolving around recognizing skills within the families and recognizing capabilities within the family and loving each family member as part of the family, not, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, right? It's building happiness through the actions of each member of the family. And it's one of the reasons why people used to organize into small communities of extended families too, because nobody was going to be as invested in the welfare of your children as your extended family would be, because your children were the generation that's going to take care of the extended family as they become the aging generation and the wise and valued old ancestors, right? This idea that we just take boys and discard their welfare for the benefit of women, just, you can't have that and have a family and a society that continues to function properly. It doesn't work. That's why we've ended up in this terrible situation. And I think from having worked with people who have temporarily come here, like there was a nursing student that I worked with not too long ago, she moved here to study nursing, and when she got her degree, she was going to go back home with her degree and practice at home. But she wanted to study medicine here. And so she was going to a local university in the Dayton metro area, and she worked with a company that I work for as a direct support professional. And the way that she described her experience of family and community in her country in Africa was very much like pre-20th century family and community in the United States, where when your parents got old, they moved into your home and you took care of them, and they saw their grandkids every day, and their grandkids helped take care of them. And they would help take care of the younger grandchildren, and the whole family was contributing to the household as best they could, and the whole family got the benefit of each other's love and each other's wisdom and each other's companionship. And it made a lot more sense than what we do today, where elderly people, even if they have kids, get shuffled off into nursing homes and forgotten about in a lot of instances. When I was nurse's aide, there were so many people who had family members that could come to see them that didn't. And it was heartbreaking. And my grandparents moved in with my parents when I was in college. I had to think, we were planning it when I was in high school, but I don't think we actually achieved it until I was away at school. But we did construction on the house. We built an in-law apartment. I say we, but my parents and my grandparents funded the creation of that in-law apartment, and they lived there until the end of their lives, both of them. And it was good for them because they had a safe place. They had advocates. Somebody said, well, your father needs heart surgery. Grandpa was ready to go get that heart surgery done, a balloon surgery. Mom took him to another doctor for a second opinion, and the other doctor ran a bunch of tests and said, you don't need to have balloon surgery. Your heart is fine. And he never did have heart problems. Like his whole life, he never had heart problems. But in any case, those kind of things, if you're in a nursing home and you don't get nursing homes don't do second opinions. You have one doctor that sees all the patients, or maybe the patient's regular doctor can come in and see them. But if somebody recommends a surgery, the surgery gets done. If somebody recommends a procedure, the procedure gets done, and they just bill the insurance. And if somebody gets an infection, they die. And so they benefited from that. But at the same time, my brother and I benefited immensely from getting to see our grandparents every day, and having them there. We ate dinner every day with not just our parents, but our grandparents. That was wonderful. And we wouldn't have had that if they'd have been in a home somewhere. Even if it was the best nursing home in the area, and they got the best possible care they could get from anybody, and it was a luxury nursing home of the few that exist. I think at both ends of that, we would have rather have had that contact. And that structure is under attack, and has been under attack by feminists for 100 years. And the destruction of that structure, if I had been an elementary school kid or a teenager, especially like junior high age, during the time when school teachers were convincing students that if, you were a little bit tomboyish as a girl, that you're actually a trans man. If you're a little bit fastidious, what they would have called metrosexual in the 90s, as a boy, you're actually a trans woman. But we'd had my grandparents at home. They both would have called bullshit on that real quick, right? If it had happened and my grandparents weren't there, I had my parents, and they would have pushed back against it. But having both my parents and my grandparents would have protected me. But if I'd have been in a situation where I didn't have that kind of protection, I probably could have been talked into thinking I was trans. Because I spent half my childhood up in a tree. I played football with the boys. I picked up bugs. I played with gooey, gross stuff. Just like I took things apart to see how they worked. This got me into an immense amount of trouble sometimes. And so on. So I would have had teachers going, that's boy stuff. You must be a boy. And clearly I'm not. Clearly I don't identify as male. No matter what Twitter says. But it would be awful, to be in that circumstance. A lot of pressure from school and so on, without having some sort of protection at home. And I think a lot of kids today would benefit from having their grandparents in their home. They are a major grounding factor. Not grounding as in you're grounded, you're being punished, but as in you got both feet on the ground, and it's a lot harder for somebody to push you in one direction or another, including the wrong direction. Right? The direction that's wrong for you. But yeah. So this thing, this attack on family and this prohibition of female genital mutilation on the continent where all the experiments were done on men and boys. And if you think the circumcision that we do in the United States is bad, now don't listen to this if you have a strong stomach, but if you have a strong stomach, look up sub-incision. It is an absolute horror show. Just unbelievable stuff. And it is a tradition. And I'm hoping that it's mostly been eliminated because it's horrifyingly torturous and unhealthy. On top of being excruciating, it creates health problems. But this is what they don't have anything in this about protecting boys at all from these types of practices. Only girls. And like I said, the face side, the side that we see, the side that we think of as human of the coin, is gynocentrism. But on the other side of that same coin, the institutional side, the side that has that little building on it, right? Whatever building they decide to feature, that's misandry. Misandry is pervasive, institutionalized. It's imposed everywhere. So, and of course, what does UN Women want to do? But rescue women from it, not men. The people who need rescued from it. So, yeah.
Yeah, we're still
Protection of
listening.
women who are at risk of being subjected to harmful practices, but not protection of men who are being subjected to harmful practices. So I'm going to stop it there. Richard Bear, yes, I was trying to not subject the rest of the listeners to a description because there are some people who cannot handle gore. But essentially, yeah, if you can handle gore, read about subincision. If you cannot handle gore, do not read about subincision. Because it is gore. There is no other way to look at that. That is gore. So, it's something that I'm hoping is being eliminated hoping that tradition is moving away from it, and I'm hoping that eventually we'll get tradition to move away move away from all types of underage genital cutting. It shouldn't be done at all. But with that, I'm going to call the show because I don't want to get on to the next subject. And I'm not going to go over the changes they want to make to marriage, other than to say they're essentially doing anti-coverture in Africa. I didn't know that there were nations in Africa that the traditions and local culture was still coverture oriented. That's kind of interesting. But the thing that happened in the U.S. was they got rid of the female consequences of coverture, but not the male obligations, and look where we are now. So I hope the African people don't fall for that shit. But in the meantime, we don't have any more super chows. We don't have any super chats or rumble rants. So I'm going to say thanks everyone for listening. Thanks to my two co-hosts for going over this with me. And thanks to Brian for making sure we are able to have the vertical chat in addition to the regular chat. Good night, all.
There you go.
See you next Tuesday. Thursday.
See you next. Well, yeah, we'll see you Tuesday. Remember, there is a HBR news on Thursday, though.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.